Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Finance and Accounting Show. And today we have another great guest on because one of the things that a lot of accounting firms are trying to figure out is how do they diversify and really just reinvent the model that they use to run their firm. Well, we have a great guest on who has talked about this on other podcasts. He's done this in his own firm and he's helping a lot of other firms think about ways to diversify and reinvent the way that they approach running their firm. So stay tuned for today's guest. So without further ado, let me bring on Arun Mehra. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm really well, Terrell. Thank you for having me on your show today. Looking forward to talking and sharing some ideas with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for staying up a little bit later. I know you're over in the UK, so thanks for staying up a little bit later for the conversation.
No problem at all.
Now, one of the things that I've been very interested in as I talk to, many friends in the accounting profession, just around the world is just, from your perspective on like what the tone of how the profession is going. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But before we do, can you give us a little bit of a context about your background?
Sure. So, okay, my background, many years ago, as you can tell by the grey hair, I trained as an accountant with PwC in London. And I worked for them for a number of years in audit. I then decided to go into investment banking. So I became an investment banker in London. Realized it wasn't really for me. I didn't enjoy the money was the only attraction, and the actual work I didn't enjoy. So, and I just recently got married to my wife, Smita, who I'm still married to, thankfully, and who was a dentist. And I realized that she was struggling in running her firm, her dental practice, and managing the financials. And I thought, you know what, there's an opportunity here. So I quit my investment banking role and I started off my firm, Samara, at that time. And we started off as an accounting and consulting and bookkeeping and payroll and all those services for dental practices. So my first client was my wife, and my hardest client was my wife, and it still is my hardest client. But since then, we've grown and we've dealt with literally hundreds upon hundreds of dentists across the UK and actually beyond the UK as well. And that's kind of where I got to over almost about a 20-year period. But maybe a few years back, we also realized that the industry was changing. And to find resource or staff or team members here in the UK was getting more and more difficult. So we decided to, right, you know what, we have to do things different. We had used offshore people before, hadn't worked particularly well. So I decided, you know what, I know what we have to do. I've got enough experience. I've made all the mistakes or plenty of mistakes through my life and through my career, but I knew we could do this ourselves. So a few years back, we set up our own offshore facility in India and to support my firm. And that's just grown from strength to strength. And now we're in a position now to help other firms with their kind of offshoring requirements as well. So that's it in a 60-second summary, Terrell.
Nice. I'm curious for you as you made that switch from investment banking into, running your own firm, what were some of the feelings that you were going through? With making that leap.
Yeah, no, it was a big shock. So at the time, I was telling all my family and friends, I'm quitting a huge six-figure salary to starting with zero. And I remember my dad saying to me, "Are you nuts? Are you crazy?" Okay, and perhaps I was in hindsight, but I was in my kind of early 30s then, and I was just very unhappy doing what I was doing. I just didn't like the environment. And I just realized it wasn't really for me. I wanted to have money was important, but a quality of life was a lot more important to me. So therefore, I was newly married. I wanted to have a family, and I realized I'd seen a lot of my colleagues in investment banking, and they would be at that desk from 7 a.m. till midnight every day, and that just wasn't going to be me. Okay. And I just thought, you know what, I'd rather, if I'm going to work those long hours, I'd rather it be in my own business. Okay. Figure it out, make mistakes, but learn a lot in the process so I can control my own diary, control my own kind of time. So that was a big shock. And going from a big salary to zero overnight was a big shock. But I'd kind of planned it. I'll be honest with you, Tara. I'd kind of saved the bonuses. I hadn't spent it on Porsche cars or anything like that. I knew this was coming in my heart. And I thought I have to have a backup plan. So I need to have money saved up to be able to work through that time. And luckily, it kind of came together.
Nice. Now, a lot of firms do look at, different industries, throughout their time of running their firm. Now, and you told us kind of why you started with it, in the dental space, but I guess as you started to get more experience with other dental practices, was there something about, the dental industry or the medical industry that really made you feel like, yeah, this is the right one to stick with?
Yeah, I think it was. I think firstly, you're dealing with professionals. Okay, you're dealing with people who have studied hard, who've worked hard to achieve where they've got to. So they kind of you're hopefully on a kind of a level where they kind of respect you as a professional as well. Secondly, they tend to pay their bills. Okay, which is always a good thing. Okay, it's an important thing in business. And as you're right, as you immerse yourself into an industry more and more, you get to understand the problems. And when you see a problem in one practice, you can say, okay, I saw this at another practice, what they did here, and you can share that knowledge to them. And that's hugely beneficial to clients. And I think by also having our own clinics, my wife has had a number of clinics over the years. I've seen firsthand the issues, the problems, but also the solutions to her problems, and that can be mirrored in other clients' practices. And I think people value that a lot, and that's been really, really helpful.
Mm-mm. Awesome. So now, as you kind of see, from a finance standpoint and an accounting standpoint, I feel like you get a view of seeing how your client's business works. And so, as you started to see all these different dental practices, did you ever start to feel like, what, there's a lot of similarities between the way they run their practice and the way you ran your accounting practice?
Yeah, no, for sure. There certainly was, and I think that some do it better than others. Okay, and I'd be the first one to put my hand up when I realised I've made mistakes and problems that arose in my firm. But if you looked at the problems in practice and the problems in a dental practice, and the problems in an accounting practice, they usually stem from poor communication or the wrong people in the wrong roles or just having the wrong people in the team. And that it kind of stems from that. It's having that right team. And I think if I looked back over the years in clients' practices, in my own firm as well, it's not having the right team members in my team. And that's always a challenge because you can grow that. One thing I've always been good at and I've always enjoyed is getting new business. Okay. I love it. It's a thrill. Okay. I love it. But then when you fail to deliver on that, okay, well, you kind of question what's the point of getting that new business in the first place? And that's kind of where I got to in my firm. And that's what I've seen other clients get to in their dental practices, that you can get the new business, but if you can't then deliver because of you haven't got the right team or the right systems or a combination of things, then you're kind of just going round and round in this vicious cycle. And you can't, you're just kind of thinking, what do I do? I need to do something different, okay, to break out of that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's a very interesting point because, that is becoming a bigger and bigger topic here in the US as far as, people being able to find the right members for their team. And you mentioned about, you had to start looking outside of the UK to really find the staff and the resources. So, you know, at the time when you started doing that, were there many other firms that you were exposed to who were using an offshore team, or are you guys pretty early into the process from, just what you were seeing?
Well, I think we started using third party, not our own one, our third party firms back in 2004, 2005. So we were pretty early, very early, okay? And we were quite pioneers at that time. But then we found that the quality was over the years, we found quality declining, okay, and prices rising. So it got to a point where I thought, you know what, I'm going to end my offshoring opportunity. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to bring it all back to the UK. And that's what we did. Okay, we brought it back to the UK. But when we brought it back to the UK, I was naive enough to think we could actually find people here in the UK to do the work. And what I realized is that the people I could find in the UK, the quality I could find for the price that I was getting, I was better off staying using those parties in India in the first place. So then I thought, well, I don't really want to go back to those firms I've used before. I'm going to do it myself. I know the problems my firm has, and I know what other accountants are having the same problems. I can set up a much, I'd like to think, better offering operation because I've experienced the problems myself in my own firm, so therefore I thought I was in a perfect position to actually open up my own kind of offshoring facility overseas.
Now, one of the challenges that a lot of firms tend to, discuss when it comes to using an offshore is, you know, aligning the skill sets with what they need to really add value to with their clients. So, as you kind of built out, the offshoring company, and how did you kind of and your company, how do you guys kind of address that as far as making sure that the people you're providing to other firms that they have the skill set to really deliver on the quality?
No, 100%. So I think we're told time and time again that as accountants we should be adding value to our clients. Okay, we're told this is where you make the money, this is where you can charge the bigger fees and stuff, and that technically that's correct. But quite often or not, as a practice owner, you get bogged down in the compliance work. Okay, the preparing, doing the bookkeeping, doing the management accounts, getting the tax returns done, dealing with the payroll. Okay. Now, those things, if you've got a good, well trained team overseas, they can take care of that. Okay. They know how to prepare of accounts. And so there's all the training that you can teach them. They can then do all the zero training, QuickBooks training, statutory accounts training, tax training, depending on which kind of jurisdiction they're dealing in. You can train them. And I think when I started back about 20 years ago using third-party firms to where it is now, I think what we've seen in places like India in particular, okay, you've had this young generation grow up in the last 20 years. We're now, I think, over 65, 70% of the population are under 35. So you've got a dearth of young people who firstly speak English very well, okay, who are very IT literate, and boy, are they hungry, okay? They're hungry to learn, they're hungry to deliver, and they want to work for international clients. They want to work for international businesses because probably because they get paid better, there are better opportunities for them, etc. So I think you've got to. But my role or our role is to make sure we're training them, we're making sure that we're developing them, we're making sure that they've got a career as well. Okay, so any team member that we have over there, it's not just they're sitting in some remote place in the world. They're an extension of my team here in the UK, and they're there to be. We have to develop them and make sure they've got a career path for themselves. And so then, any particular person, let's say you wanted to offshore, you need a bookkeeper, for example. Okay, we need to understand. Okay, what are your processes? How do you work? What software do you use? Understand your kind of SOPs, and then make sure that that guy or lady is trained up to a certain standard. And I wouldn't say it's going to be perfect from day one. It never is. Okay. As with anything, it takes a bit of time and effort on both sides. And then eventually you'll be having someone who's there on a regular basis, committed and delivering for you. So then that allows you and your team, say in the US or in the UK, to be able to focus on the client relationship, the client added value, the client advice, because the clients really aren't that interested in whether the books look immaculate and if they've been kind of done bookkeep to the nth degree properly. Okay, they're interested in how can they save some more tax and how can you help them grow their business further. That's what it is. And if you're bogged down in the compliance side of things, you never actually physically get the time to do it. You don't have the headspace to do it. But if you can rely on a team to actually be able to do that for you, to get rid of, let's say, 80 or 90% of that headache, okay, because compliance can be a headache, and they can do it well and they do it very well, that frees you up to actually then think, you know what, I can start charging higher fees. I can start doing this FD services. I can start doing all these other things I want to do. Okay, which is more interesting for your team in the UK or the US or wherever you may be.
That's a really good point. And I know on our firm, we found, a very similar journey of, as we started to get out of the details in the compliance, and we were able to add so much more value when we had a reliable team kind of supporting us. So I'm curious for, for the outsourcing services. Do you guys support clients just in the UK, or where are the types of clients that you support?
Well, we've started in the UK, but we are now looking to branch out into USA, Canada, Australia, and other jurisdictions. So we can do it because we've got a very strong base in India, a very strong base here in the UK. But we now have a process, and we've got to set up the infrastructure in a way that we can add. Let's say you wanted to hire someone who's deals with legal accounts, lawyers' accounts, for
Mhm.
instance, okay, or bookkeeping, we could probably find someone in India relatively swiftly, okay, who might be doing it on Zero or Sage or one of these softwares, and we could train them up over a few weeks if you decided to do that, and then off they go and off they start running. So geography is not a problem. We can literally cover anywhere, and even language isn't a problem. I think increasingly with technology and whether it's we've had inquiries from people who speak Spanish. We're kind of exploring how we're going to deal with that, but we're in one big world, and I see what I'm seeing, especially within the UK and the US, there are less accountants qualifying, there are less accountants coming into the industry, yet the compliance needs aren't falling, they're actually rising. Okay. So there's only a few places in the world that can actually cope to do this. I know the Philippines is one place, India is most definitely another place, because you've got English speaking people, smart people, hard working people. I think that's the so, and that then frees you got the CPAs, accountants in the home nations to say, you know what, let them deal with that. We'll deal with the client relationship. We'll do the added value stuff. We'll advise them on how to grow their business better, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very interesting time where, you see the supply demand curve when it comes to the accounting profession. It's
Yeah,
working the opposite way where the demand is growing, the supply seems to be
diminishing.
continuing to go down
Yeah.
unless you use an outsourcing strategy like that.
Absolutely, and I think technology will play its part, and I think we all know about AI and how that's going to change things, and I think some of the roles that some of the outsourcing people are doing will be taken over by AI. Some of the bookkeeping parts, but you still need good people who understand AI, who can oversee AI, who can check it. So, and you'll still need accountants, you'll still need bookkeepers to do that to make sure that the AI is doing it correctly. Okay.
Mhm.
We're still, personally, I think we're quite a way off for us to be so reliant on AI to kind of think, none of us will have jobs in the future. I don't think that's the case. I think so.
It is very interesting to hear the predictions that some people offer about, how AI is going to take over in 2 to 3 years. And I'm like, wow, they must be looking at a completely different set of AI because I
Yeah.
think we have some time before we get there.
Absolutely, and I think, and if you think about it, it's the accountants that we have today, like our team in India. What we're looking to do is they're all accountants, bookkeepers, etc. But we're training them bit by bit in AI, and before you know it, there'll be AI kind of oriented accountants. So they'll have that skill set. And if you look at some of the large players, people like Accenture, who are very kind of big in the whole outsourcing space, not necessarily accounting, but just generally outsourcing per se for everything, offshoring for everything. They're not cutting jobs. They're actually taking more people on in parts of the world, parts of like Philippines, India, and places, because they've actually need these resources to be AI experienced and qualified to support companies in Europe and in the US.
Nice. Now, I'm very curious for you. When you think about the experience of building out the accounting practice and then the experience of building out, the outsourcing company, like, what has it been like, for you of, or has it been very different building the two different types of companies?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. I think when I started off my accounting firm, I was very green. I didn't know much about business. Okay, I thought I'd walked out of investment bank and or PwC, way too arrogant, thinking, oh, I'll get my firm off the ground within 6 months. It took more like 6 years to get it off the ground. Okay? Um, but that was all part of the learning curve. So I learned a hell of a lot. When you do it yourself and you make zillions of mistakes, you learn from those mistakes, especially when it's costing you money. Okay, so so I learned a lot in that 20 year, well, 18, 15 to 20 year period. So when I came to actually setting up my outsourcing kind of operation, I'd kind of learned what not to do, more importantly, okay, and realized that I could conserve cash and do it in a different way. And in truth, that's kind of taken off much, much more quickly because of experience. To be honest with you, Terrell, experience is everything. I might have lots of grey hair because I've got experience, okay, because I know what people are looking for. I know the mistakes I made before. So I can feel I can build the offshoring outsourcing business much, much more quickly than say my accounting firm because I've kind of made all the mistakes historically in that business.
Nice, nice. It's very interesting just to see how people can carry over those transferable skills when they're building their second, third or so business. So it's really good to see that. So if people are interested in learning a little bit more about your accounting practice, where should they search for you online?
Sure. So for my accounting firm, which is called Samera, and so if you go to samera.co.uk, samera.co.uk, and that if you go on there, that's all details about how we deal with dentists, pharmacists, vets, doctors. So we've kind of branched out all across healthcare, to be honest with you. And one large part of our business, which I haven't mentioned actually, is obviously we do all the accounting and everything, but we also have a very kind of successful commercial finance part of the business. So let's say you're a dentist and you want to buy someone else's dental office. We can help fund it. We've got the whole team and infrastructure to do that. And we act as a broker in doing that. So that's been a really good part of the business. And then for the offshoring part of the business, it's still under the name of Samera, but we have a website called sameraglobal.com. And that's kind of all about the offshoring and outsourcing and how we can help other accountants if they so desire.
Nice. Great to hear. And, we'll probably have to bring you back sometime and talk really about how you really leaned into diversifying the services that you offer because you don't really hear a lot of firms that really diversify to that level with the financing and the brokerage opportunities. So it sounds like an interesting topic. But I do want to be respectful of your time and thank
Cool.
you so much, Aaron, for coming on board. And before you go, one question I love asking every guest that comes on is when you
Sure.
think about your experience, and you had to say, hey, here are two really good points that accounting firm leaders and owners should keep in mind. If you had to, just talk about two of them, what would be two things that you would say are really, really good points that accounting firm leaders and owners should keep in mind?
Very great question. I think number one is know your worth. Okay, know your worth. I think sometimes accountants get downtrodden by their clients, and people want to chip away at the price or chip away at the cost that they're going to pay. And ultimately, accountants can make a significant difference to their business, but accountants also need to believe in themselves that they can do that. So I think if I had to give any advice to any aspiring owners or current owners who are maybe struggling a little bit, it's just like stand up tall, stand up strong, and say, you know what, I can do this, and we're worth it. And if you don't like the price I'm charging you, go down the road. Okay, I've got other clients. Okay, I think that's so important. Okay, because otherwise you'll just attract the wrong type of client who wants to chip away, and before you know it, your margins are squeezed, and you're not enjoying what you're doing. So that's so important. And I suppose the second aspect of that is you can't do it on your own. You really can't do this on your own. To build a business is you need people that you trust, like you can have a beer with, you can have a laugh with, to help you build that business. And therefore, whether it's a team in your hometown or whether it's a team overseas, you need to have that relationship. And I think it's so important to build that team and build that camaraderie and build that culture. Okay, that's so important. People underestimate it. And I remember when I came into the industry, I started out all those years ago, coming from a big four firm and from investment banking, and I thought it was all about, okay, it's all about how much money you make and how the profit margins and stuff. And I had no idea. I was so clueless. I had thought it was all about margins. And over the 20 years I've learned it's the margins are irrelevant. Okay. It's all about the people. Okay. You look after your team, you build the right culture, the margins come, the profits come, the rewards come. And that to me that's the most kind of satisfying aspects as well when you're developing your team and you've got a great relationship with people in your team as well. So those are my two takeaways, Terrell.
Well, I love it. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on board. It was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Terrell. Thanks very much.